Welcome everybody to the show. First of all, want to say happy holidays to each and every single one of you. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, whatever your flavor is. I hope it goes well for you this holiday season. Tonight, I got a really special show. Publicly online, I have made some statements about the Patterson Gimlin film being fake. There's a lot of stuff when you look into Roger's background. And there's a lot of things, if you just look at the footage yourself, that, anybody that is, I guess, a free thinker, may have questions to. And there's some things that I would like answered. So, just so happens that I got Bill Munns on. He did all the work on the Patterson film. I know a lot of you guys are aware of who he is and aware of the work that he's done. So I figured I would get the answers from the horse's mouth. Also on tonight is Doug Hajicek. He created Monster Quest. I spoke with him earlier, and while I was on the phone with him, we were discussing the Patterson film, and he's like, hey, well, why don't we just get Bill on the line? And I was like, yeah, sure, let's just call Bill Munns, because that's just an everyday thing, right? But anyways, really good interview. I asked a bunch of important questions, boom, to the guys, and they answer some questions in some very educated ways, and it's hard to argue with their explanations. Definitely, I think something that you will want to hear. This is my Christmas present to the YouTube channel, I guess, here at Bigfoot Stacy. We've had a lot of subscribers this year. I think 692 since August. So, just kind of a thanks to y'all, end of the year thing. Thank y'all for subscribing. Thank y'all for sharing my videos. Thank you for liking them. And, just thank you for your support. So, I guess let's get into it. This is pre-recorded. But however, you will enjoy it, and I give you my conversation with Bill Munns and Doug Hajicek.
First thing I did, Stacy, is I'd sent Bill Munns the links from Leroy Blevins over to Bill, and of course Bill responded with, and he knew Leroy. Take it away, Bill.
Well, I knew Leroy when he first started. He contacted me, and we communicated quite a bit. And then little by little, he sort of was going off the deep end with some of his ideas. And he sort of demonstrated to me that his grasp of science and true evidence was actually not very good. He was sort of caught up in his own little world. And he's never achieved any level of credibility from any researcher that I know of. But he was a well-meaning guy. I mean, he sincerely believed what he was doing. He put a lot of his heart into it, but he didn't put a lot of science into it, unfortunately.
Right. Well, I mean, he struck me as a simple guy.
Oh, yeah.
But it's some of the things he said, like, okay, I'm sure you looked at this, but I never really, got it from the horse's mouth. But there's a way that Bob Hieronymus walks, and he kicks his heel out. And Leroy had brought this to attention that Patty, at the beginning of the footage, does the same thing, but then after Roger scrambles with the camera a bunch and you get the shot of it walking away, it doesn't do that anymore, leading to the assumption that maybe Bob was in the suit at one point and there was another person, and when he was shaking it, that was an edit. What did you think about that?
Well, first of all, there are no edits in the film. Roger started and stopped his camera 6 times during the sequence, but everyone is a true stop, true start after a few seconds. There are no edits in there. If there was an edit, it would be detectable on a contact print. The cut line in the film, where the base of the film is actually broken and then shoved one against another and then tape spliced over, light would leak through that physical cut line in the cell base. And that would show if there was any kind of a physical edit of any kind, and there isn't any on the contact print copies of the Patterson film that are available, and that I've scanned personally. So I know for certainty there's no edit, so we can dismiss that, right off the bat.
Right.
As far as Patty's walk, she has two completely different walks in the film. In the beginning, she is walking in an incredibly casual way, taking very, very short steps. And then during what we call the look-back sequence, when Roger's real close to her and filming her, and she looks back at camera, she's in what we would call a power walk. Her arms are swinging aggressively, front and rear, and she's taking very, very big, fast steps. And then later on, as she walks much further away, she goes back into her casual walk. So there are two different walks there, but the walks are realistically associated with her level of feeling that she's safe. In the beginning, when she's walking away, Roger's pretty far away. There's a creek between them, which is a natural barrier that she feels might give her a little bit of protection. And so she starts walking away very casually. But after Roger crosses the creek and comes up the other side and comes charging toward her and then plants himself to shoot the look-back sequence, that forward rush, now that he's on the same side of the creek, is what incited her to go into a power walk to more aggressively evade this intruder. So that's literally the behavioral analysis of what's going on between Roger and Patty and such. Explains the difference in the two walks perfectly realistically. Right. As far as any comparison with Bob Hieronymus, everything I've seen on him is that he usually tries to emulate the power walk and says, that's the way I walk. But he ignores the fact that in the beginning of the movie, that's not the way the subject is walking.
Right.
So that kind of undercuts his, well, that's the way I walk, because it changes. But I'm only familiar with him claiming the power walk is the way he walks. So any connection to him walking in a much slower, more casual way, I don't think any person could realistically attribute that to any special way that they in person walk. So I think Leroy's trying to see something there that doesn't exist.
Right. Now, I mean, in all fairness, you've actually seen much clearer footage than I have. Everything I'm seeing on the internet is, buddy, copy of a copy of a copy. So, that's why I have these questions. But so when you were looking at the frames, another thing that stuck out with me was the lack of a apparent butt crack. You know what I mean?
It's actually there. It's just not necessarily noticeable in all of the frames.
Right.
But it does show up on some. Fur has a way of obscuring some of the contours of the body underneath the fur, depending on how it is. And so that plus the angle of the sunlight, when you're looking at Patty, the sun is basically above your left shoulder, kind of coming down on her. So when her back is to camera and she's walking away, which is where you see the butt clearly, the angle of the sunlight going down on her body is almost a direct angle. You probably know, if you have experience in filmmaking and documentary work, you know what flat lighting is, where the lighting is just straight on the person and it kind of wipes out some of the contours. Well, the angle of the sunlight coming down on her body is basically flat lighting on her body. So that also mellows out a lot of the contours. So
Gotcha.
Those are possible explanations for why we don't see a more pronounced crease.
I just was, because, I mean, obviously it may be there on the actual footage. It's just like I said, the footage that I see is so distorted. That's one of the flags for me, but without seeing the actual footage, I think that's a fair assessment coming from anybody. You know?
Yeah, and some of the higher resolution images, there definitely is a form of a contour there. Yeah.
So back in the day when I was first into this, I was looking at the rub mark on the thigh. And then recently somebody put out a 4K version of the film, which made that rub mark look more like a crease. Like almost like it actually bends in when she puts weight down on that foot. Like, I don't know, I've heard everything from there. She was shot there, you know, that it's a top of a crease for the suit, you know. What were your thoughts on that one thing? Because I know
Now, are you talking?
Dr. Meldrum said it was like a rub line. Where
Now, are you talking about the line that's across the mid thigh going side to side?
Yeah.
Is that the one you're referring to? Okay. If you look at the film closely and you have a good copy, when she swings her arm forward and rearward, the light-dark tonality of the fur on the thigh actually changes. When her arm swings one way, dark. When her arm swings the other way, it goes light. She swings back the first way, it goes dark again. Because with any fur, whether it's natural or artificial, depending on the lay of the fur, it will reflect more or less light. When fur is brushed down in its natural lay, and it's the smoothest, it reflects the most light. So it has a light appearance. If you ruffle it so the hair is going against its natural lay, then it will suddenly get a lot darker because now light is going much deeper into the fur and kind of bouncing around inside it and not reflecting back out. You can do this with almost any plush fabric or fur, or you'll see it if you're vacuuming a carpet that's got a fairly decent level of kind of shaggy fiber sticking out from the base. And you go one way with it, which is its lay, and it suddenly looks shiny, and you pull a vacuum the other way, and it suddenly seems a lot darker. Well, her thigh does the same thing, which means when she's moving her hand forward and backward, she's actually rubbing the fur on her thigh. She's making contact with it. So one way is brushing it down so it's more flat in its normal lay, and the other way is back brushing it up so it's kind of messed up and pulled away, and then it shifts darker. So that proves that the palm of her hand is actually making contact with her thigh when the arm is swinging forward and backward. With that in mind, knowing that her hand is making contact, that line across the fur is exactly where her thumb is, which means that while her palm of her hand is rubbing fur back and forth, her thumb is actually rubbing this line back and forth, and disturbing the fur, producing that line. So that's actually what it is.
Right. Yeah, it looked, when I seen it, because I believe I'd heard that from Meldrum back in the day, but when I'd seen the new 4K version, it really, it looked like a crease, maybe like to that of a cargo pocket, you know, when like you would kind of walk or something. So I'm guessing on the footage, the actual film, you could see all that in good detail.
Oh yeah, but if once you see the light dark shift of the fur, then you know conclusively that the palm of the hand is rubbing it. Once you go there, then the line by the thumb scraping it, suddenly that becomes much more logical at that point.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, the line is a weird line. There's no question about it.
How many hours did you spend looking into this, like frame by frame?
Well, okay. As soon as I scanned Mrs. Patterson's copy back in 2009, brought it home, I spent 6 weeks image stabilizing every single frame so I could make a clearer version of it for the documentary company that had sponsored my trip up there. So I spent 6 weeks looking at every single frame of the film, probably an hour or more on every single frame before I even started comparing one to another. So I was examining virtually every frame at a 4K scan, in meticulous detail. So, yeah, I'm pretty familiar with it. And then I assembled an inventory of frames so that I could always identify a true frame as compared to a TV telecine blend. Like when they go from 24 frames to 30 frames for television, the telecine process has to combine some frames, and they're kind of mixed or blended. So I made a complete frame inventory so I can actually look at virtually any picture and tell you, A, if it's a true frame or a telecine blend, and B, I can tell you exactly what frame number it is. So going through that entire inventory, that was another couple of months of looking at virtually every frame. So, yeah, my familiarity with the frames is pretty strong.
Now, there was a question, right, as to how many frames per second he was shooting at, correct?
Yep. Yep.
What did you end up figuring out, or does that, I guess, change?
It is most likely 18 frames. It's most likely 18 frames. The Kodak K100 camera, the dial at its lowest speed setting is 16 frames per second, which was common for filming when you didn't have sound. In the old days, you saved film, you got a little bit more footage out of a 100-foot reel. But Kodak recalibrated the spring somehow so that the K100, even when it's set at 16 frames, is actually running at 18. And I bench tested one of the K100 cameras that I have, and I basically pulled the lens off so you could see the actual shutter in the gate. And I put a light inside the camera film area so that when it was, I could literally see when the shutter was open and closed, open and closed. And then I videotaped it at 240 frames per second and actually counted the number of times that frame, that the shutter opened and closed in 1 second. And I got 18 in 1 second.
Wow, dude.
So that's actually the setting that Roger was running it at, was 18 frames.
Wow. Yeah, that just, knowing the process of that, the amount of time you had to spend just doing that is pretty insane. But, okay, so I guess the last question I got on the footage. They claimed it was a black suit. Okay, now I know coloring nowadays, when I'm making a film, I can make whatever I want to, whatever color I want to. Now back then I know they didn't have today's technology, but I know the person that was developing the footage, it wasn't uniform. Like you could go to two different places and get two different colors out of the same footage.
Absolutely, depending on how they run it through the processing. Yeah.
So how comfortable are you that those colors in the footage are absolutely are the true colors, and not now I'm colorblind, so this is also a big question for me. I have to trust people on this, because like the trees look the right color. Well, I don't know what the trees actually should look like to begin with.
Well, the truth of the matter is, when you're dealing with any type of a print other than the camera original, you can't certify a color, right down to the nth degree of accuracy. Going from the original, which was Kodachrome reversal stock, and then it was copied onto Eastman safety film for the contact print copy. There's slight imbalances in the emulsion of the two. And then in each one of the processings, there's a chance that processing one of the dye layers could have been a little off compared to another to shift it ever so slightly. Plus, when you go to copy something, you build up a little bit of contrast, so you see a little bit of color shift. And then, of course, film that's been sitting in storage for 30, 40, 50-odd years, sometimes some of the dyes in there weaken a little bit. Like there are some Patterson copies that are almost solidly tinted in magenta, and most of the natural color is practically gone. There's a few that are very, very strong in kind of a sepia brown color. I don't know if this makes sense to you since you say you're colorblind, but anyways, there are a number of copies where the color balance is so far off it's just unbelievable. But there are a few copies that have a relatively good color balance, and when you look at the foliage, the greens are a reasonably true plant green, and the fall-autumn leaves are reasonably true orange-red autumn color. So we look at the overall ambience of the scene, and the colors are reasonably true. So we can use that as our gauge and say that what we're seeing on the film is probably a reasonably accurate rendition of the colors that were there. Now, Patty herself was not pure black. She was actually kind of a middle brown color. She tends to look black on most of the stuff like it's on YouTube because every time it's copied, it builds up a little more contrast. The lights get lighter, the darks get darker, and little by little, her tonality is shifted, a little darker, a little darker, a little darker, till a lot of images make her look like she's nearly pure black. But she was actually more of a middle brown, and when, back around 1980, Renee DeHinden, a researcher, and a guy named Bruce Bonney, who was a photo expert, they got hold of the camera original, and Bonney made some Cibachrome prints right off of the camera original frames, and some of them were close-ups on Patty. And now Cibachrome is famous for the brilliance of its colors, so its formulation really kicks up saturation and makes everything a little brighter. But the Cibachrome prints of Patty show her as being a medium, almost auburn brown, a reddish brown almost. Now, some of that's probably the Cibachrome kicking up the saturation a little bit. But she actually was a little bit more kind of a grayish brown. And it's a lot of the copying and the buildup of contrast that's kind of shifted her to look more blackish.
Wow. Well, so I guess 110% you believe it's real.
Yes, I do.
That's cool, man. As a filmmaker, I think, and I've always wanted to try to recreate it. You know what I mean? To see if I could do it. Because everybody's like, hey, you can't do it. You can't. Nobody can do it. Well, I'll take that as a challenge. So that's why I wanted to hear from the horse's mouth to see what, you thought. Because there's also a lot of stuff about Roger that, like
what's called the backstory.
Yeah, statistically, what are the chances that he basically drew Patty a year before he filmed her? Like, what is the actual statistics on that? I'm not a big math guy, so I don't know, but it's got to be pretty out there.
Well, okay. The rebuttal to that particular argument would be, if they exist and this is what they look like, and someone described, I saw a female, she looked like this, her breasts were quite prominent, such and such, and he sketched what was described, and then he saw one of that same species, it wouldn't be out of line for it to look like what he had been described earlier, because his drawing goes from someone else's eyewitness account of seeing one. He didn't just, as an artist, pull that out of thin air. He actually was drawing what,
Do we know who that was?
I can't remember. I think it was William Rowe.
Yeah. And that was a female in his...
Yes, it was a female.
Yep.
And I think the original drawing was done either by Rowe or his daughter.
Yeah.
So Roger drew anything, he drew a copy of Rowe's drawing. Yeah.
And of course, it doesn't take rocket science to know that there's probably half the population, or close, is female, the other half male. So it's got breasts, so it would only be a 50% chance.
Yeah.
Right. It always would be
kind of like, it would be kind of like somebody 150 years ago said, I saw this giant, horrible sea creature that looked like kind of a cone shape with 8 tentacles radiating out from it. And he drew a picture of it. And then later on, somebody filmed a giant squid, and you look at it and say, wow, that just looks exactly like the picture. Simply because that's the true anatomy of what was seen before and filmed now. Kind of might follow that way.
Well, that's a good
William
rebuttal.
Rowe. William Rowe. I don't know if you're familiar with the William Rowe incident, Stacy, but he was picking, I think it was blueberries or raspberries, and he had seen this creature in the patch. Wasn't aware that he was there because it had wandered in after he was there, and apparently he observed it at quite close range. So.
Wow.
Yeah, and then after he saw it, he told his daughter, and she sketched what he described seeing, something like that. Yeah.
And that's what Patterson drew.
The drawing comes from Rowe, right. And Patterson just copied that.
Right on, right on.
Well, the other thing that's interesting is if you look at the sketch that Roger did, the head is way off. I mean, the head really is. It's got a flat top. It's got a wide face. It's got a very man-like, masculine type face. So I don't think Roger did a very good job there.
No, I don't think he was an artist by no means.
No,
he wasn't.
But,
no, he wasn't.
Yeah, man, I didn't realize that had that was a drawing he copied from somebody. You know, but because when you see it, it's kind of in the same pose as when Patty turns and looks. You know what I'm saying? So from the outside looking in, and these are questions
Are you talking about the one in the? Are you talking about the one which is in a kind of a wildlife scene where there's a guy hiding behind a log?
No,
that's not Roger's artwork.
It's on a white piece of paper, and the arm swings kind of the same. She's walking the same way. She's got
a profile of a figure. Yeah. That's a very, very crude drawing, right?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just like, what are the chances? But I guess, if he had seen somebody else's drawing, because obviously there's only so many ways Bigfoot's going to look.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, man.
But I think it was the breast that caught your attention, Stacy. It was the breast.
That's what always catches everybody's attention. But yeah, I mean, the fact that it did have breasts on it, it's like, oh, come on, man, because the general public, that's how they look at this. That's how they understand it, and I'm part of the general public. Even though I'm a Bigfoot researcher, I still, I still have these questions like everybody else because I want the footage to be real, but I've never seen the footage the way you have.
Well, one of the big things that certainly Bill can convey are the joint placements, which the first time I had it brought up to me was by John Green, and certainly it doesn't take much work to do some measuring and go, oh my God, the elbow is where the forearm would be. Bill, can you elaborate on some of the joint placements?
Yeah, we've been able to actually analyze the body in considerable detail by studying where the joints bend, where the ankle bends, the knee bends, where the thigh rotates around the pelvis, where the elbow bends, the wrist, the shoulder swing, everything. And we've been able to map out the anatomy quite well. And what we have is an anatomy form that's very, very unusual in terms of human proportions. The arms are unusually long. The torso is not as long as the arms, but is also unusually long. The legs are unusually short. And the relationship between the upper and the lower leg, it's an anthropological thing called the Crural Index, comparing the upper leg to the lower leg. That actually has a very, very low ratio to it. And of human beings, there are only 2 human populations that actually have this low Crural Index, the relationship between the upper and lower leg. And those are the Inuit people of North America above the Arctic Circle, and the Laplanders called the Sami people in Lapland or Iceland or thereabouts. And those 2 human races that are in the incredibly northern climate are the only 2 that routinely have this very low Crural Index. For humans, the legs are almost always longer than the torso and much longer than the arms. But in this case, they're not. So we're dealing with a proportion that's while it's not impossible for human, it is so strange as to be extraordinarily rare. We also find that low Crural Index on some very early human ancestors like Neanderthal, and I believe one of our earlier ancestors called Paranthropus boisei that lived about 1.5 million years ago. They have that similar leg proportion, which is uncharacteristic of modern Homo sapien human. So the proportions are definitely a little strange. And the way the body moves, there is no way that the proportions can be cheated to shift their position for a human of normal proportion to wear, so it looks like the joints have changed. The more you bend a joint, the less you can cheat where it is. And she bends all of these joints enough that we can determine to a certainty exactly where the true skeletal pivot point is. So we can add it all up, and her proportions are definitely very, very strange as humans go. So she's got this huge extension of her arms, what in basketball they call a player's wingspan. And, they're just way longer than the norm. So she's got these incredibly long arms, this long torso, and these shorter legs. And it's a very, very rare combination. Oddly enough, you'll only see anything even close to it on people who are really short, like under 5 feet tall. You won't see a proportion like that on a person who's like 6 foot or 6'3" or whatever like that. Because for a person of that greater height, most of that height is in their legs. So the legs get longer, the torso is about the same. So we're seeing a proportion that could only match up to a human who might be, 4'8" or 4'10". So, that also kind of,
your elbow bends at a different place, than where hers bends, and there's probably no way to fake that.
There isn't, no. I was involved for many years doing special makeup effects and creature work in Hollywood. And all through the 80s and going into the 90s, when the producers were asking for every imaginable crazy kind of creature, and everybody wanted something new, something different. They wanted you to push the envelope further. And I and everybody in the business who was a designer, we were constantly struggling with this, trying to make a creature suit that didn't just look like a human in a suit, and we wanted desperately to try and shift the joints this way or that way, or this longer, this shorter, and nobody ever figured out a way to do it so that it looked believable. Nobody ever figured out a way to shift the joints other than, say you lock down the elbow and make the wrist the elbow and extend the arm 2.5 feet. So you got these arms that practically drag on the floor. That kind of thing, you could shift one joint to another joint, and it would throw the proportions way off. But for an ape suit, you can't shift the joints that far. So even if you're talking about an ape suit with arm extensions on it, all the arm extensions do is extend the wrist. They don't extend the elbow. So if you put the arm extensions on, here you got this arm with a short upper arm and a really long lower arm. And if you actually see it in motion, it just looks painfully fake.
Right. Yeah, it's the mechanics of it would definitely be difficult. But how much?
Oh yeah.
How much did you take into effect? Like when you went into this, before you looked at one frame, you said you were a costume guy. You know, you've done that thing. So,
Right.
Where were you at on the fence when, you know, were you thinking, this thing's not real, I'm about to prove it's fake? Or were you, hey, I believe this is real, I'm going to show you why?
Up until, I don't know, the mid-'90s maybe, I was kind of on the fence where I didn't really look at it closely. I was aware of it, of course. And I was kind of, I don't know. I mean, there's just something about it that just doesn't seem like a costume, but I'm not really sure. My opinion of it being real didn't really solidify until somewhere close to the year 2000, somewhere in there. I happened to look back at some of the footage. I hadn't looked at it in many years, and I looked at it. And I had done some television commercials with ape suits. And it was one of the jobs that I had when I was working in the business. And I'd remembered how miserable it was trying to keep the back of the neck, the fur from the head going across the neck to the torso, trying to keep that smooth. And man, when I was doing the job, I was just fighting with that every second. And every time they stopped the camera, I'd rush in there. I'd brush the actor's fur of his costume from the head to the torso out to try to smooth it out, so that every time they started the camera again, at least the back of the neck started smooth. But every time the guy started turning his head around, that would kind of screw it up a little bit. So I was really aware of the smoothness or lack of smoothness in the back of the neck from the head to the torso. And I happened to be looking at the film again, and that recollection came to mind. And I just zeroed in on the back of the neck and watched the film over and over and over again. And I just came to the conclusion, I said, there's no way that's a costume, because in '67, there was no way we could connect the head to the torso and get a line that smooth after he's turned his head, or she's turned her head way to the side to look at the camera and then snapped her head back and walked away. That smoothness wasn't successfully done in movies until 1984, with Rick Baker's team doing the apes on Tarzan, the Legend of Greystoke. The very first time they got a perfectly smooth fur line from head through neck down to the torso on that movie. That's 84, 17 years after Roger's film. So realizing that nobody in the movie business up until 84 had successfully done a smooth transition of fur from head across neck into torso. That was the thing that kind of pushed me off the fence and said, yeah, the damn thing's real.
So how cool was that when you just was it just like, oh my gosh, you know, like a resounding moment, or you know, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool, I'm gonna work on this now. So
well, actually, after that hit me, every time I'd watch it after that, I'd get kind of a chill up my spine when I'd say to myself, son of a bitch, this damn film is real. You know, it actually kind of scared me. This thing is out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Chester's very one of those.
Yeah, but it's everyone.
But yeah, when I was a kid, this footage was, you know, it's what got everybody into it. You know, this and Boggy Creek. But I had questions. You know, I could ask a ton of questions about Roger, but you're not the person for that. The suit, you know, just trying to, like I said, I've always been wanting to remake it. I'm wanting to see if I could do it. You know, just so everybody says, because I know the BBC did it and it was really terrible. It didn't even look like they tried. It looked like they rushed
actually, the BBC one, that was a suit that happened to be already made for another purpose and was hanging around in a shop. So they didn't even make that one for the BBC. I think that was a guy named John Volch or Volacek or something like that. And he had it in his shop, and they said, oh, well, we'll just use this one. We don't have a budget to make a new one. So, yeah, it wasn't even intended to be a perfect match. And, of course, it wasn't even close.
Yeah,
not
it
even
really
a resemblance.
Well, if I decide, or if I figure out how to get the money to remake the suit, and I give it a shot, I make a documentary about it. Would you be willing to let me interview and look at my footage and tell me how close I am?
Oh, absolutely would. And if I can suggest, not that I'm trying to plug my book, I have a book out called When Roger Met Patty, and there are several very lengthy chapters with a lot of illustration on exactly how to build an ape suit. So when you analyze what you see at the Patterson film, you can actually relate it to the actual process of constructing an ape suit. So if you're thinking about building one, I would wholeheartedly suggest you get the book and read through the chapters like 7 and 8, which talk about what it actually takes to build an ape suit. And it'll practically be a blueprint of how to do it.
Well, that's good information right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I really, honestly, as a passion project, I want to try to recreate the footage. It may not be able to be done, you know. And
But you should try, actually. I've wanted to myself.
Yeah,
I've wanted to see realistically how close can you get.
Because part of me as a filmmaker wants to say, because I know everybody's like, oh, well, you couldn't make a suit back then, but the tapes we see on YouTube, the versions of it, it looks like it's the perfect storm of a low quality camera and a fairly good quality suit. You know, the camera's bad enough to where you can't see the defects.
That's because of the copies.
Right.
The original Ektachrome film that Roger shot with was developed perfectly for absolute maximum clarity and resolution. And Kodachrome film was one of the highest resolution 16 millimeter films around. So the camera original is unbelievably sharp and clear. So regardless of how crappy all the YouTube copies look, the original film was meticulously sharp. The camera that Roger used, the K100 camera, was one of the finest 16 millimeter cameras ever built. Now, it was a spring wind. It didn't have a battery motor like an Aeroflex and a Claire NPR or maybe a Beaulieu or Bolex or, you know, any of those. It wasn't a motor-driven camera. It was a spring wind camera, but within the category of spring wind cameras, it was royalty in the camera world. The spring was like 2.5 times more powerful than almost every standard spring drive in other cameras. They'd usually run you about 30 seconds of footage. On one wind of the K100, that'll go 1 minute and 40 seconds on one wind. You know, okay. It'll go through like, 40% of a 100-foot load.
Right.
And it was considered, the Rolls Royce of 16 millimeter spring wind cameras. So actually, it was an exceptionally good camera. The lens on the camera, which was a Kodak Cine-Ektar lens, they were some of the top-of-the-line lenses of the time, so we can't say it was a crappy lens. And the film was incredibly high quality. So when you look at camera lens film, that's Rolls-Royce all the way. The fact that YouTube videos are so crappy doesn't have any reflection on the quality of the original.
Now, was this the K100 that had like the little carousel of lenses on the front of it?
That's one version. There's a single lens version, and then there's a 3-lens turret version. Roger used the single lens version.
Okay.
He had the single lens version.
Right. Well, I hope that my questions haven't numbed your mind, because I mean they just I know they
not at all.
They're coming from a I haven't actually seen the original footage. These are just, as I look at it, these are questions that pop up in my mind, and I like to try to get answers to the stuff. So
sure.
You've hushed a lot of my arguments today. I can't I can't argue with some of the stuff you say. You have pretty good rebuttals about a lot of my questions. So
yeah. Well, let me tell you something. Honestly, I mean, there's a lot of people who think I went into it already believing and wanting to just validate my belief. But actually, I went into it doing everything humanly possible to try to discredit the film and prove it's a fake, because no one's ever conclusively proven it's a fake. Every attempt has failed miserably.
Right.
And if I succeeded with my knowledge of filmmaking and costume making and everything, if I had succeeded in proving absolutely unequivocally it's a fake, that actually would have been a tremendous credit for me. So when I went into it, I was actually more than willing to call it a fake if I could find an ounce of evidence that would verify it. If I found any evidence of editing in the film, I would have shouted it to the world. If I would have found anything in the footage that showed a lack of continuity between the different 6 segments, like changes in the shadow, like you've got a tree with a shadow on it in segment 4, and then you see it again in segment 5. Now, if it was faked and he had stopped filming at the end of segment 4 and was talking through with his people, okay, now for the next one, here's what we're going to do, and you're going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and this and that. And they took maybe 10, 15 minutes just to work out the next one, and then they went ahead and shot it. The shadow on the tree would have moved in that 10, 15 minutes,
Right.
but it didn't. I was examining shadows all the way through that could be seen in 2 different segments, to see if there was anything that would show a shift in the shadow that would indicate even a few minutes of pause. Couldn't find anything. So I went through it actually trying to find any evidence whatsoever that it was fake. And man, if I'd have found it, I would not have hesitated to shout it to the world.
Well, now,
but the bottom line is, just isn't any.
Right. But did you take this on before you did the documentary, or was it all the same process? Because, like, some of the argument about that is, well, the production company didn't want him to find.
No.
So I never knew
I
if
started
you were
the research about it. I started the research a year before any documentary company contacted me, and Doug was actually the first person who asked me to do a segment of Monster Quest. But even after that point, each time a documentary company contacted me about doing an analysis for them and appearing in their documentary, no one ever in any way, shape, or form tried to influence me to go this way or that way or something like that. Never.
Right.
But I actually, when I started, I was not involved in any documentary. I just did it because I wanted an answer for myself.
Right on, right on. Yeah, I didn't know that. Unfortunately, I've worked with enough TV guys that I know how they do. So I figured.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of them who throw reality out the window and say, no, let's sell this idea instead. It'll sell better and play better. No, nobody's ever done that to me.
Right on. Well, Bud, hey, where can I get your book? Do you have a website, or you find it on Amazon or
just
something?
Amazon.com.
Okay, cool. I don't.
And it's both it's a hardbound and a Kindle edition. You can get it either way.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not
Called When Roger Met Patty.
Not a big reader, but I will read that. That is because this is to me, this is a bigger mystery than the moon landing, which I question that as well. In all fairness, I'm one of those guys.
Yeah.
I just sometimes you got to hear from the horse's mouth yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
Hey, Bill.
Yes, Doug.
A couple of points that were missed. One, the tendons, and then the forearm. We didn't talk about the actual joint on the forearm, and then the head. Basically, a human head couldn't even fit in the head of the Patterson.
Yeah, exactly. Because right at the brow ridge above the eye, human head or human skull goes almost straight up. But from the brow ridge of Patty, her skull goes straight backwards. So you got no room to put the frontal lobes of a human being into her face. So yeah, you can't make a mask that's the size and proportion of Patty's head and put a human head in it, basically. Can't be done.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Well, yeah. Hey, like I said, man, I won't take up much more of your time, but thank you so much. You made my holidays a little bit brighter. Just this whole conversation, I was like nervous about it before. I was like, oh my gosh, what questions am I gonna ask Bill Munns? So, but yeah, hey, well, y'all have a happy holiday, man, and take care, stay safe in this coronavirus plagued world.
Sure. And Stacy, you're welcome to contact me anytime if you do want to carry on with your doc and you have questions and you just want, straight up answer. By all means, lob an email over or something, and I'll be glad to, give you info, point you in the right direction,
I'll
provide
send
you with evidence, whatever.
Bill, I'll send him your email and your phone number if it's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
hey, because
good.
I'm like 100% serious about wanting to make that this year. It was something I was trying to do last year, and didn't get around to it for whatever reason. But because I had spoken with M.K. Davis, and then I was really looking at that Leroy Blevins stuff. But you got good rebuttals about to most of my questions.
Sure.
So, but still, I do want to try to do it myself, like just for my own sake, if nothing else. And if nobody wants to watch it, that's whatever. I don't care. I just want to be, because I don't mind saying it's real. I've always, till I was about 28, I believed it was real. But then I just started questioning it, and I was like, what if they could have done this? What if this would have happened? Blah blah blah. And I want some closure. I'd love for it to be real, or I'd love for it to know. I just don't want to 20 years down the road something comes up and somebody's got the suit and stuff like that. And then it's like,
Sure.
Stacy, I can tell you this. Okay, Bob, Bob is still alive. I don't know if you've met Bob. I don't think you have.
yeah,
But,
I've met Bob a few times.
okay, but I
So
literally, maybe a day or so after I knew him and I met with him, I had talked to my executive producer over at OLN, and I said, hey, is there any way you guys could afford $1 million to give to Bob if we could do a TV show on how he faked this Patterson footage? I said it would be the most watched show ever. And he's like, yeah. So go ahead and do it. Offer it to him. I turned around and offered Bob $1 million. Bob goes, Doug, I'd love to take your money. Let me tell you again what happened. That was it.
wow.
He didn't even think about it. It was just instant.
And see, that's the stuff the public doesn't know about.
Yeah.
No, the public doesn't know that. And Bob's was not then, and certainly I'm sure now a rich man.
Yeah, well, $1 million is a lot. You can take care of things and leave your loved ones, because he's getting older.
Yeah,
and on top of that, every single day you don't know when it's going to be your last.
At that point, Bob had not made one penny off that film.
Yeah, and
Nothing.
I never understood why he sold the rights for like $10. Like, if you were there,
Yeah, he
you
really
knew what
wasn't
you
in it for the
filmed.
profit. He wasn't really in it for the profit so much. I think he just wanted the recognition.
Right. I guess it's like if you filmed it and you know what you actually filmed, I wouldn't have never sold my rights. But that's me. I'd be like, no, dude, nope. I was there. I was a part of that. I took you into the woods. Those were my horses, or whoever's horses they were. Anyways, he was a big part of getting them out there. I just can't imagine the argument or where he was just done with it.
Well, at that point in his life, he actually wanted to forget it. He was so sick and tired of people not believing him and harassing him and harassing his wife that at that point, right after Roger passed away in '72, he actually wanted it to just go away.
Right.
So that's why he probably sold that out so cheap. Was it he just wished it would disappear?
Yeah, I'm sure the reporters and stuff showing up to his house didn't help nothing.
Yeah. Or the people in the town who'd look at him kind of weird, like, Oh, yeah, Bob was telling that foolish story that they saw Bigfoot when it was just Bob Hieronymus running around in a furfoot costume, you know.
Yeah, because you had him
Yeah.
running around telling everybody it was him, right? Or did Bob wait
Yeah.
until years afterwards to do that?
Yeah. No, he within his circle of friends, yeah, he was claiming it was him.
Gotcha. Well, yeah. Hey, so I'm definitely gonna be in touch with you about this because, like I said, I've got a guy who makes costumes. He claims he can do it using the technology from back then. So I don't know. It's gonna be a put up or shut up kind of thing, and I will happily shut my mouth if I can't do it. Okay, guys. So there you have it. My conversation with Bill Munns and Doug Hajicek. If you had any of those same questions that I did, hopefully that shed some light on you. You know, the butt crack thing is bothersome, but then again, we're not looking at the actual footage. However, I very much still want to see if I can recreate this footage. Is this something that you guys would be interested in? Once again, happy holidays, everybody. Hope you enjoyed my video. Share, like, subscribe, and all that jazz. And stay tuned because I got more coming to you. Have a good one. Peace.